Hi, this is Jane Green, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 5 of The Grapes of Wrath. In this chapter, Simek describes the day when the tenant families, such as the Jodes, are told that the crops they are producing are no longer profitable. Tensions begin to build between both of the groups before the ownermen finally admit that the tenant system does not work anymore and that they must move out of the land. As the tenants plead to be given another chance, the representatives demands that they still leave. The next day, the tractors arrive, bulldozing the land and destroying everything in its path. The tenants recognize the man in the tractor as one of them, a neighbor, and when they go and confront him, they soon realize that what matters here is the money. Some of the ownermen were kind because they hated what they had to do, and some of them were angry because they hated to be cruel, and some of them were cold because they had long ago found that one could not be an owner unless one were cold. And all of them were caught in something much larger than themselves. Some of them hated the mathematics that drove them, and some were afraid, and some worshipped the mathematics because it provided a refuge from thought and from feeling. If a bank or finance company owned the land, the ownerman said, the bank or the company needs, wants, insists, must have, as though the bank or the company were a monster, with thought and with feeling, which had ensnared them. These last would take no responsibility for the banks or the companies because they were men and slaves, while the banks were machines and masters all at the same time. And some of the ownermen were a little proud to be slaves to such cold and powerful masters. I think that this passage serves as a look into the complicated power dynamics that are intrinsic within capitalism, and it explores kind of how this system removes morality and can create a sense of powerlessness onto its subject, with this metaphor of the bank being almost this, this monster, this entity that controls all, right? It emphasizes the dominance of such a powerful structure. He also uses very specific language like machines and ensnared, and I think that helps depict these ownermen as cogs in this capital-driven machine. It shows this loss of humanity through the pursuit of financial gain. Another thing that is in this passage that I think is very important to the overall message, the overall themes, is that Steinbeck doesn't necessarily solely cast blame onto ownermen, right? Instead, he kind of goes at it with a little bit of sympathy and acknowledges that they are also victims to something much larger. His repetition or whatever of some of it adds complexity, and it helps us understand what these men are thinking, which I think it's so easy to just make them be these idiots who have no backbone, but that they know that what's happening is bad. So I think that just adds another layer. I think that's why the repetition there is very important. Allows for a glimpse into the psyche of the workers, right? Humanizing a little bit their struggles, But at the same time, he doesn't shy away from critiquing the fact that they are still enablers of this oppressive system, right? They found solace, the fact that it helped them, it was almost like a refuge, right, from thought and from feeling. And he also explained how some of these men take pride in their status as owners, despite their role in perpetuating inequality. And I think that calls into questions the values of this post-industrial society where individuals, and this is just further commentary, individuals often sacrifice personal fulfillment and hopes and dreams for this kind of illusion of stability, and they enjoy this high-ranking job because it secures their place in society. Another important factor in this passage is, I think, the syntax is very important. I think there's this one specific sentence. I really like this sentence because it kind of makes it seem like the ownermen are scrambling to find a excuse, right?
like, oh, it needs, it wants, assists, it must have. But the truth is that this bank doesn't have to have this money. But yes, in the sense that, for this institution to thrive, it needs, money, it needs to make profit. But he's kind of pointing out the irony of, like, the fact that this is all man-made, this is all human-made, and therefore we can stop this, but we don't choose to. And that was also an important part of this passage, as well with, diving into more of this, metaphors and calling the owner men slaves, but also men, and the banks as machines and masters. Because, again, highlighting this sort of like power dynamic and the fact that the owner men are still people and the banks are, companies, they're corporations or institutions. I think that's just also kind of an interesting fact, and it adds on to this theme of dehumanization under capitalism.
Oh my gosh! It's time for another passage!
The man sitting in the iron seat did not look like a man. Gloved, goggled, rubber desk mask over nose and mouth, he was a part of the monster, a robot in the seat. The thunder of the cylinders sounded through the country, became one with the air and the earth. So the earth and air muttered in sympathetic vibration. The driver could not control it. Straight across country it went, cutting through a dozen farms and straight back. A twitch at the controls could swerve the cat, but the driver's hands could not switch because the monster that built the tractors, the monster that sent the tractor out, had somehow got into the driver's hands, into his brain and muscle, had goggled him and muzzled him, goggled his mind, muzzled his speech, goggled his perception, muzzled his protest. He could not see the land as it was. He could not smell the land as it smelled. His feet did not stamp the clods or feel the warmth and power of the earth. He sat in an iron seat and stepped on iron pedals. He could not cheer or beat or curse or encourage the extension of his power, and because of this he could not cheer or whip or curse or encourage himself. He did not know or own or trust or beseech the land.
So this passage brings to light the dehumanizing effects of mechanization on the people who work it. Steinbeck, the imagery here is amazing. Like, he uses such vivid imagery which kind of helps depict the tractor driver as no longer human. Now he is just an extension of this machine that he's supposed to control. With this imagery that the uniform that these men have to wear kind of hides what they look like. It hides who they are, right? And this it's almost like removing the face from the crime. Again, that, allows for this driver to be further detached to, what they do. And this imagery kind of helps Steinbeck introduce this, Jeffersonian, agrarian ideal that kind of focuses on the importance of the connection between farmer and land, right? Emphasizing how, when you sever this deep bond, this relationship, it kind of results in this lack of, autonomy, you just stop being who you are. And so all of this helps to personify the loss of human will at the hands of machines and corporations.
Hold on, they're telling me something. You know what they're telling me? That it's time for another passage!
You're wrong. He got his orders from the bank. The bank told him, clear those people out or it's your job. Well, there's the president of the bank. There's a board of directors. I'll fill up the magazine of the rifle and go into the bank. The driver said, fellow was telling me the bank gets orders from the east. The orders were, make the land show profit or we'll close you up. But where does it stop? Who can we shoot? I don't aim to starve to death before I kill the man that's starving me. I don't know. Maybe there's nobody to shoot. Maybe the thing isn't met at all. Maybe, like you said, the property's doing it. Anyway, I told you my orders. So I think that this passage kind of encapsulates the central idea or theme within the novel, which is the struggle between, the forces of capitalism and the dignity, right, of the individual. It's so hard not to, kind of fall into corruption under the system. And so I think that through this dialogue is important because one, like, this is the first time we're hearing like two people speak to each other in an actual narrative way. And secondly, it adds like a level of importance or, you know, experience, emotion. It personifies obviously the struggles of these people, and you can kind of identify with this tenant. Through this dialogue between the tenant and the driver, it kind of highlights the fact that, you know, by just pointing out specific individuals of an oppressive system, you're not going to do anything. You need that collective action to actually change systems. Oh my god, I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm missing something. Oh yeah, it's the rhetorical questions that are like basically 50% of this entire chapter. Why? I think it just, again, is supposed to highlight hopefulness, but also like just full on despair. You know, I think it helps us really connect with the characters, with the people, especially being such an old book. You might not, you know, truly understand, but you know, with these questions you can kind of go into the mind of poor Okies. And not just that, but these questions, you start, you know, and you try to answer them yourself, like, we don't know, where are they gonna go, what is going to happen, right? There's a sense of uncertainty, and also it does a really good job of taking the reader and kind of involving them.
Alright, so plot parallels. I said that it provides context as to why the Jodes move and helps further develop the situation in Oklahoma, which is true, because here at the first quote we have Molly, and he's talking about how some guy was telling him to get off the land. You know, it ain't his fault. We heard that rhetoric already multiple times in chapter 5, and now we know who this person is. It's someone who's been contracted by the bank. Why don't you go on west to California? Well, we know that's exactly what they plan on doing, right? So that just ends up, you know, adding further to the plot. And also, there ain't nothing here, 50 cents a clean acre for shopping cotton. But, you know, so again, it shows how there's nothing there, you know, just like how chapter 5 described. I also said that it helps introduce characters we haven't met yet, like Grandpa, Noah, and even Molly. So like the first quote that I chose was about Grandpa, you know, with his guns, and then we find out that he does actually own a rifle, and then the bigger boys squatted beside their fathers. We already know that's Noah. And then I couldn't send Molly Graves, something just wouldn't let me, right? Molly's basically saying like, no, it is, like, I just can't leave my land, which is like the people at the end.
So I think all of this can be tied back to, you know, why did Steinbeck write this chapter? And, you know, other than the like literal reasons, as, you know, it gives us more detail about why the Jodes are moving in the first place. It introduces a conflict that will probably remain important to the whole message of the book, but also allowed for Steinbeck to add his social commentary, the dehumanizing effects of large industries.